Hello and welcome to my relaxing and educational series on ancient Egypt. We are in the game Assassin's Creed Origins, and this is our friend Bayek, who's going to act as sort of our tour guide today. We are going to cover some really interesting topics like gladiators, mummies, the Sphinx. So if you have been looking forward to a sequel, I'm hoping that this will cover a lot of things that you are looking forward to learning about ancient Egypt. Let me just walk over to our first tour, which is going to be on magic and rituals in ancient Egypt. And as always, if you want to skip to a certain tour, you can find timestamps to the specific tours we go on in the description and also in the comments. And if you are on PC, you should be able to just scroll over the screen of the video and see them segmented out. A pretty nifty feature if you ask me. Okay, here's our first tour. It is called Amulets and Rituals. Alright, Bayek, let's begin. Welcome to Amulets and Rituals. Let's begin. Ancient Egyptians believed the world was a chaotic place filled with supernatural forces. They knew that art and words gave life to power to things. Carved of images from hieroglyphs or in the shapes of gods, amulets were highly personal objects that warded off dangers and disease while attracting success. Some amulets were temporary, intended to solve a specific problem, while others were meant to be worn forever into the afterlife. And here are some amulets. I'm gonna try to make him walk slowly because running is not relaxing. Okay, Bayek. Priests would infuse amulets with magical energy during religious ceremonies, imbuing them with protective magic to safeguard against supernatural powers. The wealthiest of Egyptians could obtain a divinely ordained pendant in which was hidden a magic formula inscribed on a piece of papyrus. It would act as a unique spell. I didn't get the end of that. What happened to it? Oh, a unique spell tailored to the owner. There we go. Sorry, sometimes the captions move a little too quickly for me. Religion was so important to ancient Egyptians that it permeated every aspect of their daily lives. Since water was the source of life and had the symbolism of purifying the body and the soul, all daily routines began with ablutions. Personal prayers to the gods were sometimes written or spoken, with family prayers passed down through generations. And as always, there is probably going to be words that I don't pronounce correctly. I'm sorry. There was a complete calendar of each of the religious days, both good and bad, illustrating the appropriate daily rituals. Along with wine, milk, and ointments, offerings to the gods consisted of small amulets to life-size statues and family shrines. That man was missing part of his body. During the Greco-Roman period, offerings to the gods consisted of mummified animals, cats for Bastet, dogs for Anubis, and birds for Thoth. Thoth. Again, not sure. I'm sure I'll get a lot of them wrong, but that's okay because I will try. A lot of these words I only read and I don't hear, although I did listen to some of them when playing the game, and stuff, like playing it normally and not doing the discovery tour. Deemed messengers of the gods, oracles offered guidance and judgment for all Egyptians, regardless of status. crucial advice was offered on everything from day-to-day farming management to a pharaoh's decision on whether to start a war. Oracles were often used to decide legal issues. If the accused refused the judgment of the god, another god could be consulted in hopes of a more favorable reply. So you could just basically go from oracle, to god, just hoping for the answer you want, right? It was oracles that guided the Greek sailor Bartos to the coast of Libya, where he founded a colony known as Cyrene. During Alexander the Great's campaign to conquer Persia, he consulted the oracle at the Temple of Amun within the oasis of Siwa and was subsequently ordained a divine being. Wow, and that was the end of our first tour. So now you see how this will go. Let's go on to our next tour, which will be right here, the Gladiator Arena. Let's fast travel over there. I thought it would be fun to have a little ancient Roman history in here too. Oh, look at it. It's quite beautiful, isn't it? Alright, learn about gladiator arenas in the Roman Republic. It's a short tour. Welcome to the Gladiator Arena. Thank you. We're also going to learn about Cleopatra. That's one of the tours I'm going to take you on, so we're going to get quite a bit of Roman history. While gladiators would not perform in Cyrene until later in the Roman era, the team of this game decided to include a gladiatorial arena for two reasons. First, they believed it was important to portray this aspect of Roman life, and second, they felt it would add interesting gameplay possibilities. So this is not super historically accurate, but it's in this game to show what it would have looked like when it was part of the Roman period. The first gladiators to enter the arena were prisoners of war. It was a spectacle of violent clashes between men and against wild beasts that lasted nearly 1,000 years. Sounds like the fights went on for 1,000 years. Sounds awful. Fighting with a pig for 1,000 years or something. Oh look, everyone's dancing over here. They look very happy. Eventually, volunteers began to enter the ring. For status and money, many of the more skilled combatants increased the quality of the entertainment. Thus, the profession of gladiator came to be. Bound by contract to the master of the gladiators, the fighters were fed, trained, and guarded in barracks. I'm not sure if the frame rate is just dropping because of the way I'm viewing this, but I'll have to mess with my settings again. I play the game in 4K, which is not the best for recording, especially because I downgrade it. But anyway, I'll mess with my settings later. Gladiators were separated into heavy and light armored fighters, each with their own set of specific armor and weapons. Organizers often had two audience-favored factions face each other in combat. There was a kid there, I thought. He's gone now. Are we going to get to go in the arena? I don't think so. It would be cool though. You get to fight in the arena in Odyssey. And you get to do chariot races in Origins. That's very fun. I remember winning one with Bayek. The events were highly organized. Fights are held with a background of music and supervised by a referee. Death, either in the course of combat or by decision, was not always the only way out for the loser. Several were released due to their performance and gained a great notoriety as celebrities. The rock stars of their time. So I picked Bayek because I've been watching a show, Raised by Wolves. It's like an HBO Max show with Ridley Scott. We're going to go to do Cleopatra next. So And one of the main characters in it is the voice of Bayek. He's got such a great voice, so it's made me want to use Bayek in this video. He's a great actor, by the way. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. I'm very excited for this one. Welcome to Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. It is beautiful here. Wow. Cleopatra VII Philopatra ascended the throne in 51 BCE at the age of 18. Her power was often challenged. She eventually prevailed and became the sole ruler of Egypt. Sorry, I was reading too slowly. According to Plutarch, she was the only Ptolemaic pharaoh to speak the Egyptian language. Her intelligence, coupled with a good education and a great political mind, allowed her to make the alliances necessary to maintain the independence of Egypt while Rome was becoming a Mediterranean empire. If you haven't seen the HBO show Rome, by the way, it's very good, and they cover a lot of these points in history, particularly Cleopatra. It's very, very cool and interesting. It is important to understand that Cleopatra's knowledge of Egyptian language and keen understanding of the culture allowed her to make powerful ideological reference that resonated with ancient Egyptians. By associating herself with the goddess Isis, the Divine Mother, great of magic and repository of divine essence, Cleopatra firmly established herself as the protector of the two lands and legitimized her place on the throne. Yeah, you need to watch Rome, it's really good. And it is a shame that they cancelled it. They just wanted to stop doing it to make way for Game of Thrones, basically. Which is a shame. So a lot of the actors from Rome refused to work on Game of Thrones, apparently. Fun fact. Wow. Beautiful, isn't it? Look at the obelisks. Wow. And the statues. I love it here. I haven't been here in the game. I didn't know about it. Upon his death in 51 BCE, Ptolemy XII Allos bequeathed his kingdom to his daughter and eldest son, Cleopatra VII, and Ptolemy XIII. As was custom, the siblings were married. The new pharaoh was 10 years old, his sister wife 17. The early years of their reign were not easy. Between 50 and 48 BCE, droughts and floods aggravated Egypt's problems. General Achilles and the royal advisor Pothinos kept intervening in the young ruler's political decisions, and eventually colluded to turn Ptolemy XIII against Cleopatra. By 48 BCE, Cleopatra was in exile. That's where you meet her in the show, when she's in exile. During Cleopatra's exile, the Roman Empire was not without its own internal conflict. Caesar and Pompey were at war with one another, and after his defeat in 48 BCE, Pompey fled to Alexandria in the hope of finding refuge. This turned out to be an unwise decision. Listening to his advisors, Ptolemy XIII elected to have Pompey assassinated. His head kept as a gift in the hopes of acquiring Caesar's favor. This gambit backfired. Instead of earning approval, the murder of a Roman greatly angered Caesar. Yikes. Yeah, that was a very big yikes on their part. Oh, wow. Look at it in here. It's just beautiful. Yeah, I'll have to play this game again, start playing it, and go here, because gorgeous. I assume you meet Cleopatra and have quests with her. I haven't played that much. Cleopatra, aware of Caesar's anger against Ptolemy for the murder of Pompey, decided to take advantage of the situation. She returned to Egypt in secret, hoping to establish an alliance with one of the most powerful men of the time. outside of the legend where she had herself smuggled into his quarters in a carpet, what exactly happened during that fateful meeting remains a mystery. However, Caesar seemed to see a better ruler for Egypt in Cleopatra than in her young and too easily influenced brother. Invoking Ptolemy XII's will, Caesar attempted to mediate peace between the siblings. Ptolemy XIII was enraged by the turn of events, and his advisors were none too happy to see Cleopatra return. Urged on by General Achillas and Pothanos, the young pharaoh plotted against Caesar and Cleopatra, resulting in the siege of Alexandria in 47 BCE. It was in March 47 BCE that Caesar defeated Ptolemy XIII's forces. The young pharaoh drowned in the Nile after having fled the battlefield. With her opponents dead or powerless, Cleopatra married her other, much younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, and finally claimed the throne of Egypt for good. The end of the Alexandrian War was also cemented romantic and political alliance between Cleopatra and Caesar. She was a very clever, conniving girl. In June of 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, whom she called Caesarion. Caesar did not accept the boy as his heir, choosing instead his nephew, Octavian. Nonetheless, on his return to Rome, Caesar invited the queen and her brother-husband to stay in the city. Her presence still drew much disapproval from the Senate. Always a strategist, Caesar left 4 regions in Egypt, and a man he trusted to direct Egyptian affairs, giving him control of the wheat supplies essential to Rome. Cleopatra and her entourage remained in Rome until March 44 BCE, when Caesar was murdered. Yeah, this is making me want to watch Rome again because it lasted like right up until around then, the Ides of March, and a little after, I think. I believe there were just like 2 seasons. It's really good though. I'm gonna rewatch it, I think. And if you're a history buff like me, you will enjoy it. Especially if you enjoy these history tours that I take you on. Sorry, my knee cracked. It's nice and dark in the game. It's nighttime. Caesar's most faithful ally, Mark Antony, often visited the Queen of Egypt during his stay in Rome. Unlike most, he recognized the legitimacy of Caesarion, the natural son of Caesar. Antony knew he would need the riches of Egypt in order to fight Octavian and claim the Roman Empire. Cleopatra, in return, saw a powerful ally. In the winter of 41 BCE, she arranged a sumptuous tour of Egypt by boat to show Antony the wealth of her country and the power she held as its ruler. A romantic and political relationship followed. The Roman Senate was once again most displeased. To calm spirits in Rome, Antony married Octavia, sister of Octavian. Really original names, huh? You'll be Octavian, you'll be Octavia. Yeah, what a power couple though, right? Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Or just Cleopatra and anybody, because she was really quite a woman. Despite his marriage to Octavia, Antony remained Cleopatra's lover, and she gave birth to their children. Cleopatra increased her kingdom's territory and started a political propaganda alongside her lover in Egypt and beyond. She hoped to create a Ptolemaic federal empire with Alexandria at its center. Antony eventually repudiated his Roman wife for the Egyptian queen, much to the dismay of the Roman elite. However, while Mark Antony focused on Egypt, Octavian carefully gained military and political ascendancy over him in Rome. Wow, that guy is really, really tall, really big. Octavian managed his own propaganda campaign and succeeded. The Roman people hated Mark Antony and Cleopatra. To avoid the censure still inherent in attacking a fellow Roman, Octavian simply declared war against Egypt. Rome's power still reigned supreme. The powerful Egyptian fleet led by Cleopatra as well as Mark Antony's forces were defeated in 31 BCE in Actium. Octavian arrived in Egypt in 30 BCE to formalize his victory. It's all going downhill, isn't it? Well, I'm afraid you probably know what happens next, how the story ends. The following events remain difficult to confirm due to the many versions and legends around them. It is believed that after hearing a rumor about Cleopatra's suicide, Mark Antony committed suicide himself. He was brought to the queen as he slowly passed away. Knowing that Octavian would have her chained and paraded through Roman defeat, Cleopatra planned her own suicide. She most likely killed herself with arsenic, though admittedly the version where she uses an asp to deliver a fatal bite may be considered more dramatic. What happened to the body of Cleopatra is still a mystery. And that was Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I think it's very interesting. What was the one I was going to do next? I planned these out, but there's just so many different tours you can go on. That's not the mummy one. There's a different mummy one. On like the mummification process that we're gonna do. Well, let's just do the Sphinx next because I plan on us going there. We did the pyramids last time, or a pyramid. This time we'll do the Sphinx. Ooh, look at them. This should be interesting. I don't know much about the Sphinx. Oh, it's very bright now. Welcome to the Riddles of the Sphinx. Beautiful. Yes, nice and bright and sunny. A sphinx was originally meant to be a personification of the king. The human head, wearing pharaonic regalia, was fused with the body of a lion, thus sharing the qualities the powerful animal possessed, namely its power, the swiftness of its attack, and its majestic authority. By these very virtues, it was also considered a symbol of protection. Unsurprisingly, statues of sphinxes could be found along the dromos, protectors of the path taken by the gods to reach the temples. Okay, next stop. Over the centuries, enthusiasts and historians alike have wondered, who built the Sphinx? For what purpose? And who does it represent? These questions remain unanswered. Several theories do exist, however, some more credible than others. One theory supposes that Jedefre chose to pay homage to his father Khufu by building the Great Sphinx of Giza. The stone temple on the eastern face of the Sphinx would have been added later on by his brother and successor, Khafre, in order to strengthen the divine worship of their father. It would be the very first Egyptian temple oriented with the sun. Beautiful. And it's nice to see the color. Oh, I think we have to do a little jump. There we go. Another theory suggests that the Sphinx was built by Khafre and was meant to represent him. The arguments to support this hypothesis are based on the fact that the limestone beds used for the main work, the Temple of the Sphinx, are geographically and architecturally similar to the Valley Temple of Khafre. Some believe that Khufu himself built the Sphinx, which was later finished under his successors, Djedefre and Khafre. These arguments are based on the stylistics of the engraving, the typology of the names, and the absence of a beard at the time of construction. Names sound like memes. Okay, sorry. I love seeing the pyramids in the background is beautiful. While ancient Egypt as a whole leaves a rather monochrome vision of its monuments and statuary, it is vital to understand that in ancient times, absolutely everything was painted. The sun eating away the pigments of the colors, the sand, the climate, and the implacable impact of time unfortunately destroyed the glorious colors of the Sphinx of Giza. Documents from an Arab Egyptologist of the 12th century, Abd al-Latif al-Baghdadi, indicate that traces of red were still visible in his time. Today, however, the only color that remains are traces of red close to the ears of the Sphinx, as well as hints of blue and yellow on the names, traditional colors for that type of headdress. The pigments for the color red were man-made, obtained by mixing different products, such as clay, quartz sand, and very finely crushed hematite. Very cool. Here's a behind the scenes. Red has a strong symbolism in ancient Egypt. It was both the color of life and the color of death. It could represent the sands of the desert or the brilliance of the sun. Red was also associated with the gods Seth, vengeful and destructive. The Egyptian word for red, desidder, I think, is also the word which was used to signify the desert or the royal crown of Lower Egypt. In art, red was also the color used to paint the bodies of men, while yellow was for women. It is possible that there were also color restoration efforts during the Sayyid period, about 600 years before Cleopatra's rule, as indicated by notes on the inventory stele discovered in 1858 by Auguste Mariette. It is because of this that the team made the decision to display it with its full range of colors, even though the Sphinx's colors would have likely faded by Cleopatra's time, which is a shame, but I'm glad that we get to see how it might have looked. I would like to see it in its glory. Dating from the 4th dynasty, approximately 2600-2500 BCE, the Great Sphinx of Giza is the oldest and largest sphinx that we know of. Carved from a natural limestone outcrop, the Sphinx measures 19.8 meters in height, 73.2 meters in length, and 14 meters in width. It's huge. Another behind the scenes. In order to bring polish to the imposing monument, several blocks of limestone were added after the initial construction phase. Since then, there have been numerous attempts at preservation. The polish present in the game integrates some aspects of modern restoration attempts. The team made this choice to present a more iconic version of the Sphinx of Giza to the player. Today, the Sphinx is called the Terrifying One. This appellation is translated from its Arabic name, Abul Hol, which in turn was derived from Bahuba in Coptic. I think we're gonna have to climb it. Feels kinda disrespectful, but you go by it. Climb that Sphinx. The Sphinx as a whole was carved in situ from a natural stone promontory. Its head was built in a limestone peak of the Mokattam plate, and the body was sculpted in the underlying rock layer where it is located. The degradation of the Sphinx is due in particular to wind erosion and the different quality of limestone used in its construction. The level of sodium contained in the groundwater, which abuts the stone, is also a contributing factor. That's a shame, really. But, it would have been very hard to build it to last back then. The natural bedrock is seen through the oblique natural strata of the Sphinx's body that are similar to the surrounding limestone. Yeah, you can see that limestone around us. Since antiquity, people have always believed there was a hidden tomb deep within the Sphinx. It is thought that attempts to plunder the Sphinx began as far back as the First Intermediate Period. Since then, numerous attempts to pierce the Sphinx's secrets have been carried out, leaving indelible scars upon the monument. What a shame, really. Oh, sorry, my body is cracking. Oh, big jump here. Ooh. Bayek will be fine. Oh, what's that? 12 meters long and cut during pharaonic times, another entrance in the back of the Sphinx aroused curiosity. Although Thutmose IV attempted to seal it off, it was possibly reopened by treasure hunters. It was rediscovered by Howard Vyse and mapped more recently by Mark Lenner. The entrance at the back of the Sphinx leads to different cavities of a few meters each in directions going inside the statue's body and under the surface. The team has used this opportunity to extrapolate a little more. I want to go inside, but I don't remember how to crouch. I might not be able to. They might not want me to go in. That seems silly. No. Oh well, I'm gonna move on because we don't have time to do this. Sorry. Gotta continue with the tour. While there have been no major discoveries pertaining to the Sphinx of Giza in recent years, theories and hypotheses continue to emerge. Without validation provided by archaeological sources, however, they remain unsubstantiated. Oh, okay. That's unfortunate. Trudge the sand, Bayek. Ooh, there were feathers in there. First of the main theories as to the Sphinx of Giza's meaning posits that the Sphinx was originally a massive representation of the god Anubis. Its principal arguments are that the head of the Sphinx is disproportionate compared to the size of its body. The second theory believes that the representation of two sphinxes on the stela of Thutmose IV would indicate that another stone sphinx had existed on the site itself, possibly even in paired symmetry on the other side of the Nile. However, neither of these theories can be verified in any way. Oh, that's a shame. That'd be really cool. A second twin sphinx. Several scientific projects using new technologies have been put in place in the past decades. The most important was led by Mark Lenner and his team, who specialized in the study and survey of the Giza Plateau, including the Sphinx site. The mapping made it possible to see the materials used to construct the Sphinx, analyze the different layers of erosion, and figure out the most fragile areas to protect. After a few attempts at giving the Sphinx artistic proportions, the team instead decided to use photogrammetry to faithfully reproduce the proportions of the Sphinx. Very cool. I'm glad they stayed photoreal. They should. What the Sphinx of Giza represented during its construction and how the Sphinx was perceived by the Egyptians of the New Kingdom are two very different matters. Originally a representation of the king imbued with the power of the lion, the Sphinx was eventually viewed as a direct representation of the most divine. It is theorized that kings of the New Kingdom believed that the Sphinx of Giza was the one who recognized and legitimized the ruler of Egypt. Thus, despite the fact the Sphinx of Giza was partially buried under the sand during his reign, Amenhotep II knew that the monument was of great importance. Yeah, it's a giant statue, I'd hope so. Amenhotep II built a second temple dedicated for the Sphinx as Horemakhet to pay homage to Khufu and Khafre, his predecessors. It became a common habit for this dynasty to spend time with their royal sanctuary became known as Setebek, the Chosen. Sorry, I was doing a good job up until then. Sometimes a little too slow. Egyptologist Mark Lenner believed that Amenhotep II built a statue of himself anchored between the paws of the Sphinx, likely to legitimize his reign, alongside a stela found by Selima Sun. Many other pharaohs of this dynasty, such as Tutankhamun and Ramses II, also left marks of their passage in a similar fashion, sometimes even stripping the stones of nearby temples and pyramids to do so. Amenhotep's second son and successor, Thutmose IV, was a frequent offender. Tut tut, am I right? Just a little Egyptology joke. Egyptian history. While sleeping between the Sphinx's paws, the future Thutmose IV saw in a dream the god Horemheb proclaiming his ascension on the throne of the two lands. This was, of course, on the condition that he remove all of the sand covering the Sphinx, which stood guard as the personification of the god, and should thus never be engulfed by the sands of the desert. Seems like a Herculean task to keep it uncovered. The 15-ton dream stela built by Thutmose IV to commemorate this dream was discovered by an Italian Egyptologist, Giovanni Battista Caviglia, in 1818, when he undertook the task of freeing the Sphinx from the sand which had, yet again, covered it. Caviglia was looking for an entrance into the structure of the Sphinx, but instead he discovered an open-air chapel and stelas between the paws. Ashes from a ceremony were still present. Protected by sand, they quite possibly were from the last ceremonies in Roman times. Wow, that's amazing. That same year, Caviglia discovered fragments of the Sphinx's beard that had probably been added during the New Kingdom. If many of these pieces are held by museums in Cairo, a fragment is displayed at the British Museum, along with a piece of the uraeus that was on the Sphinx's headdress. It is believed this fragment of beard was possibly kept in place thanks to the statue of Amenhotep II, which was supposed to be located under the head of the Sphinx. I've been to the British Museum. I don't remember seeing a piece of the beard. A popular cultural legend purports that the nose of the Sphinx of Giza was lost during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte to the cannon fire of French soldiers in training. However, engravings from before the time of that campaign already depicted the Sphinx without a nose, indicating that it had been removed before the French campaign. So how did it lose its nose? The most plausible hypothesis is based on the research of the German historian Ulrich Hartmann. During the 1980s, Hartmann compiled medieval sources written by Arab authors. In doing so, he discovered that the Sphinx was once perceived as a favorable omen, a deity supporting sediment-nurturing floods and crops. Around 1378, a Sufi by the name of Muhammad Saim al-Dar could not stand this vision of the monument, and in an iconoclastic act, broke the nose of the Sphinx. According to the text, he was then hanged and burned between the legs of the Sphinx for his crime. Wow, that's intense, right? Okay, that was the riddles of the Sphinx. What did you think about what we learned? I thought it was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Now, yeah. This is going to be our last tour, and I'm going to give a little content warning. This is going to get a little graphic, visually and, verbally. You will hear about the mummification process, which, wasn't super pleasant. So you might want to turn it off if you're a bit squeamish, and don't look. The mummification process used by ancient Egyptians was highly ceremonial in nature. The different types of mummification took into account the social level and richness of the deceased, and even included animals. The most expensive was that reserved for the pharaoh and the royal family, as well as some of the wealthiest members of the court. course, the best treatment is saved for the pharaohs. Okay, here's where it starts to get a little graphic. We're gonna watch it happen. The first step was cleaning. Once bodies arrived at the mummification site, they were placed on inclined tables while the bodily fluids drained away. They were then cleaned by priests until they were deemed ready for the purification process. His feet, the bottom of his feet look like super smooth. The purification of the body began with a libation from sacred water. The priest then fumigated the body with terebinth resin. After the ritual cleansing, priests used oils, spices, and all kinds of essences to further purify the body of the deceased. Finally, all body hair was meticulously removed. All body hair. Wow. I hope they waxed, because that sounds like an arduous task. Once the body was properly purified, embalmers removed the organs, following very specific procedures. First, the brain was extracted by inserting a spoon through the nostril to break the ethmoid bone. Then, using a spatula, the pieces of brain were removed as thoroughly as possible. What matter remained was extracted after a process of liquefaction achieved through the use of a caustic liquid. I told you. The cranial box, once emptied, was rinsed and disinfected with palm wine, and then stuffed with strips of linen cloth and liquefied resin. Yep, I warned you guys. Oh boy. After taking care of the brain, embalmers made an incision on the left flank and carefully set aside the viscera. The inside of the body was also rinsed with palm wine. Then the embalmers filled the belly with pure myrrh, cinnamon, and other perfumes, and sewed it shut. The removed viscera were washed in palm wine and packed in crushed herbs before being placed in canopic jars. Well, I guess it is Halloween month. Gonna get some creepy, spooky mummy action going on. Canopic jars were placed close to the sarcophagus or kept in a chest nearby. At first, the viscera were removed in tissue and placed in the vases. As the ritual requirements became more elaborate, ointment, spices, and even water and natron were added to the process. How did they originally come up with this is what I wonder. Who was the first person to mummify someone and why? Toward the middle of the New Kingdom, canopic jars assumed the appearance of the 4 sons of Horus. They were known as the protectors of the viscera. These protectors had their own guardians, each a goddess of the dead. Imseti, the human-headed god, protected the liver and was protected by the goddess Isis. Hapi, the baboon-headed god, protected the lungs and was protected by the goddess Nephthys. Tuamutef, the jackal-headed god, protected the stomach and was protected by the goddess Nith. And finally, Kebun-Sunuth, the falcon-headed god, protected the intestines and was protected by the goddess Selket. Wow. Very cool. I quite like the baboon-headed god. I don't know why. Natron is a naturally occurring mineral found in evaporite. These sedimentary rocks are made up of minerals, salts, and were generally mined from lake beds in Egypt. So that's the natron. Embalmers use natron as a desiccant to dry the flesh and stop the corpse's putrefaction process. Once the body was cleansed and eviscerated, the deceased was covered in natron for about 40 days. Once desiccated, the body was prepared to be wrapped in strips of linen. That's the famous mummy image that we know so well, of course. It's quite a place, isn't it? Once the body was fully desiccated by the natron treatment, embalmers oiled, painted, and sometimes even added hair extensions or a wig. They often used a henna-based antiseptic preparation to give the body a more colorful and lively appearance while preparing it to resist molds and fungi. Now, here we go. Next came the phase which gave the mummies their most well-known appearance, the wrapping. Originally, each part of the body was wrapped separately. Men had their arms crossed on their chests, while women had the right arm folded over their breasts and the left arm stretched along the body. However, techniques evolved over time. Eventually, the body as a whole was wrapped with limbs alongside the body, and increasingly sophisticated and different techniques of weaving black spans were developed. Interesting. In addition to the jewelry and amulets arranged on the skin of the deceased, amulets were also carefully inserted into the weaving of the linen strips. Each amulet was linked to a myth or to an ideological belief related to rebirth. I knew about this because in Victorian times they used to have unwrapping parties where they would get a mummy and a bunch of wealthy people would unwrap it and take the jewels. Masks were an important part of a mummy's finery. Early wooden funeral coverings were very expensive, however, and replaced by masks created through a technique known as cartonnage. Masks fashioned with this method were created by laying several layers of linen or papyrus pulp on a base made of mud or straw. Cartonnage was used for more than funerary masks. Ornaments in the animal coffins of the late period were also made in such a fashion. Cartonnage evolved to cover the entire body of the mummy during the 22nd dynasty. The mummies were placed on a board inside a rigid envelope of cartonnage, which was laced at the back with a string. Extremely cost-effective and visually pleasing, this technique was very popular through all layers of the society. Cartonnage envelopes were usually covered with inscriptions and polychrome decorations specifying the names and titles of the deceased, scenes depicting daily life, or decorations specific to the funerary world. This was a true gift for Egyptologists eager to study the funerary rites of the ancient Egyptians. Once the mummy was properly wrapped and adorned, the embalmers proceeded with the ceremony of the opening of the mouth. A vital step of the funerary process, this ceremony was meant to bring back to life the deceased themselves, or an object representing the deceased. It's so colorful in here. There were no less than 75 different stages for the opening of the mouth. It required the application of the same oils, ointments, spices, and perfumes used during the mummification process. Makeup was sometimes part of the process as well. The last stage of this long ritual was the act of touching the mouth with the adze, to symbolically allow the breath of life to infuse an inert body. Its performance was reserved for a very specific set of people: priests who wore the mask of the god Anubis, a close relative of the family, or by the heir to the throne. And thus completes our tour, Mummies of Ancient Egypt. I hope it wasn't too graphic for you, but it is interesting, for sure. Let me just walk around, and I'm gonna say goodnight to you now. I very sincerely hope you enjoyed this tour, and I hope that not only did you find it relaxing, I hope you learned several things as well, like I did. As always, please give a like if you'd like more, and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of my content, because I'll be making more of these videos. The next one will be a part 2 to my Assassin's Creed Odyssey video, so I'll be doing more ancient Greece next, so subscribe to keep an eye out for that one. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos or extra videos, you can always become a patron. So for now, I hope you sleep well and enjoy the rest of your day or your week. I hope you're having a great October, or just whenever you're listening to this. And I will see you all in my next video. So from Bayek and myself,